Welcome back to Badger Blitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. Once again, I'm Matt Perkins, joined today on a special National Signing Day episode with BadgerBlitz.com publisher John McNamara. John, it has been quite the day for the Badgers.
It has been, and then capped off by something that I certainly didn't expect to flip Trech Kekahuna from Arizona, a former Wisconsin commit, and when he thought he had the day wrapped up, when he thought he just spoke to Luke Fickell and just were kind of plowing through some of his quotes and notes and stuff like that, to have that kind of spring out of the blue was quite a surprise and pretty great way to close off this class for Wisconsin, at least until they get to the next signing period, which is in February. But just kind of talking to a few people on the other end, they were kind of surprised too from Wisconsin's end. This wasn't something that, like Snowden, I think they felt pretty good about for a while. I think this was like, hey, let's throw this out and see if we connect on something. And obviously they did with a big 4-star receiver to close this class.
Do you know what sort of put it over the top? Because he just committed to Arizona within the last 10 days probably. Like what made him? Have you had any insights on what sort of made him come back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't, and we're working on getting a hold of him, and obviously this just kind of came about within the last hour or so. But I don't. I know that he obviously took an official to Wisconsin, in the summer, and committed, and then he made it back to Madison again. Obviously, you have Nick Herbig in there, who's saying a lot of great things about Wisconsin's time there. Kamoy Latu's kind of in the same boat. They obviously have that connection to Hawaii, but I don't know what the one thing was that made him change his mind today. If this was something that has been in his mind for the last couple of days, but like you said, Matt, this is a kid who just made a commitment to Arizona with a top group of, I think Wisconsin, Arizona, Oregon. And you kind of said, okay, just a couple of days before signing day, this is where he'll sign. And again, it's one of the bigger signing day surprises that I can remember since I've been doing this in the last, 15 years or so.
Yeah, I was shocked when that came across my Twitter timeline when I saw that he had committed. The other big name that wasn't committed beforehand today was Amare Snowden. A lot of people kind of expected him to sign with Wisconsin. I think every single crystal ball and future cast had him at Wisconsin. So that wasn't a huge surprise. In the article that we released yesterday, I wrote that he was the best prospect in the class, and I still believe that. He's a kid who has just truly, truly elite traits as a cornerback. What do you think about the Snowden commitment, and how do you think that's going to affect the Badgers defensive back room? Because they signed a ton of D-backs.
Yeah, it's different, right? And that's in a good way. I don't know the last 6'3", 190-pound defensive back that Wisconsin has signed. So, getting a chance to talk to Luke Fickell today, they project him to play cornerback, which is very interesting. Maybe that's someone that can bounce around, play a little safety as well. But just a huge addition from a kid who had 40+ scholarships during the course of his recruitment, and then also a kid who wanted to play baseball too. So not only are you convincing him to follow that coaching staff from Cincinnati to Wisconsin, you're convincing him that to say, look, football is your best path to maybe maximize your talent, and we don't offer it here at Wisconsin. So a lot of trust in that, that coaching staff with Coach Fickell and that group that Snowden must have in order to leave baseball behind, which is something that he did want to do in college, and commit to Wisconsin, the vision that they have, at Wisconsin under Luke Fickell right now.
Yeah, it's been. I was a little bit shocked, especially with the baseball thing, because he's a big-time baseball recruit, like a big-time baseball recruit. So that is a bit of a shock. But it's probably good for Wisconsin. Obviously, I think he has to start at corner. All of the comps for him are Sauce Gardner, which is kind of out of this world. But Michigan kid, got the length, the height. 84-inch wingspan. That's crazy. That's a 7-foot wingspan on a guy who's 6'3". Those kinds of arms, those athletes don't grow on trees, especially in Wisconsin typically. So it is a huge, huge pickup. Okay, let's talk about some of the guys that we knew were coming that we're going to sign today. In the article that, John, we dropped on Badger Blitz yesterday, we talked about a bunch of the different superlatives, biggest surprises, and things like that. I think that Amare Snowden is the best prospect in this class, but I think you can make a pretty strong case for a couple other guys. If it's not Snowden, who in your eyes is the number one guy?
Yeah, I think Braden Moore's close there too. Another kid when you have these really unique measurables, 6'2", 180 pounds. You pop on the film and you say, okay, this kid looks like a linebacker, but he runs and plays like a defensive back. Wisconsin's talked about him playing in that boundary safety role, and then that new 3-3-5 look. So, like I said, very similar to Snowden in that you just haven't seen these defensive backs with this type of size that Wisconsin's brought in a lot of years. So to put him in a class with Snowden, it's just so unique. And I think it's such a big get for Wisconsin, especially when you want to make the next step and potentially compete with a school like Michigan or a school like Ohio State, which churns out these first round wide receivers on a year to year basis. To put these type of cornerbacks of this type of size, I think is certainly a step in the right direction. So I think Braden Moore's kind of in the next step. If you look at the next highest rated, James Duran's right in that mix. Kid who had a big senior season. Guy who had some Wisconsin connections. They got on him early, offered early, secured his commitment. He really never wavered too. Big, thick kid, strong kid. I think he projects to the interior there. And in a class where, Luke Fickell talked about it today, where they didn't want to force anything on the offensive line. They could have got up to 2 or 3, but they wanted to focus on the guys that they felt good about, and Duran was obviously one of them. It'll be interesting to see if anything kind of pops up at offensive line. As they go into February for that second period, I think the door is still open there. And Luke Fickell kind of talked about that today as well.
Yeah, we know in the transfer portal as well that I think Cincinnati's former all-conference center has hit the portal as well. One of their offensive linemen hit the portal recently that we know may be a target for the Badgers as well. Or did I get that wrong? I thought I saw something about one of their O-linemen hitting the portal relatively recently after the bowl game. So who would miss this?
Renfro?
Yeah, Renfro.
Yeah, that's someone to keep an eye on. Like someone who could come and play center right away.
Especially with Tip going to the pros.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good momentum, I think, is working in Wisconsin's favor. That's not a done deal, but no. If you were to wind up at Wisconsin, that certainly would not surprise me.
No, wouldn't surprise me either at all. So I actually talked with Duran a little bit earlier today as well. He's a really impressive kid. I think he's going to get up to speed really fast. And one of the things that I really gleaned from that conversation was the fact that he plays in basically what is already Phil Longo's system in high school. So it's not going to take him a ton of time probably to get up to speed, at least in terms of understanding the offense, understanding his, the role as, most of these guys who are already on the team are going to be coming from a completely different position in terms of, what they know about this, the spread offense that they're going to be running, this air raid offense that they're going to be running. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do once he's able to get on campus. But you mentioned Moore a little bit earlier, where there's a lot of D-backs in this class, and a kid that I'm really high on, it's probably just because it rubbed off from Clint onto me, is Justin Taylor, the safety out of Chicago. I love this kid. I put him as the most important player in this class because of his leadership ability. I think that this kid is just someone who, he's got a lot of Dakota Dixon. Like, he reminds me a lot of Dakota Dixon in terms of like the leadership and what a lot of the fellow classmates say about him. But I'm curious as to your thoughts here on Taylor, or as well on Duclona, the other defensive back they brought in. I mean, they're loading up on the back end where the Badgers are losing a lot of guys to graduation and the transfer portal. So what are your thoughts overall here on Duclona and Taylor and just sort of the defensive backfield as a whole here in this class?
Yeah, and that's something that Luke Fickell was asked about today is, going heavy on cornerback. And, you talked about Justin Taylor, just kind of glancing over here because Wisconsin kind of gave us this official, signing day thing. Some guys are designated as cornerbacks. Jace Arnold is designated just as a cornerback, but they have a guy like Amare Snowden just as a defensive back. And Justin Taylor falls in that same category as well. Whereas AJ Tisdale is just designated as a cornerback. So, to me, that kind of triggers that they're thinking he's versatile. Can he play safety? Can he bump up and play cornerback? Could he play a little bit in the slot? And, when you have 5 defensive backs in the field, primarily in that scheme, which we anticipate Wisconsin is going to move to, you're going to want to have more of them on the field, and two, you're looking for some versatility there. So, Luke Fickell, like I said, was asked about, kind of going cornerback or defensive back heavy, and he acknowledged that. And he didn't say is because, we need to play more defensive backs. He kind of said, looking at the roster, he thought safety was strong, and he went out and said that. But he said that, they needed some work at cornerback. Not that they didn't like the guys that they have, but they felt like, there's going to be guys graduating, and they need to kind of fill some holes there, and they wanted to bring in some guys. And look, you can't pass up a guy like Snowden late in the process. You take him even if you had 13 cornerbacks taken, So it's 4 right now, I think, at that cornerback position. A guy like Taylor, is at 5 with Taylor. I think he could play corner if you needed him to. I think he could play safety. I think he could play a lot of different positions. So I think all those guys bring some versatility, and it's an exciting group. I think Taylor's a real nice complement to, Braden Moore at safety. Moore's longer, rangier. I think, Taylor can come up and fill in the box. His tape has shown that, but he's a good cover guy as well. So I like what they've done at both spots. And that's traditionally a couple positions where Wisconsin has a difficult time recruiting, and I think they've done really, really well in this cycle in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, I mean, Snowden is the top-rated corner in the Rivals.com era for the Badgers. Even once you consider like athletes who became corners, he's the top-rated kid that they've ever gotten at. I mean, for your first class being here for 3-4 weeks now for Fickell, to bring that kind of stuff, I mean, that's super impressive, and I know is getting Badger fans really going already. And so, as we lead into the bowl week here, there's just more and more and more excitement building around the program. But I think we're going to see some of these kids on the field, pretty early on in their careers. I think Snowden's a kid who's probably going to play as a true freshman. In the article, I actually think that Nate White, the tailback out of the state of Wisconsin, the only in-state kid on scholarship this year, could actually see the field pretty early just because of how thin that running back room is. I mean, it's basically Braylon Allen, Ches Malusi, and I mean, Julius Davis is still there, but he's never really sort of, I don't know if he's been in the doghouse or just something hasn't clicked with him necessarily with the coaches in his time at UW yet, but he hasn't gotten a ton of reps. So we could see Nate White on third down packages. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, playing pretty early. Who do you see going out there and making an immediate impact this fall?
Yeah, in Coach Fickell talked about Nate White today too, and something interesting he said he's going to run track at Wisconsin, and I thought that was interesting. And Nate is obviously a guy, I don't know his track times off the top of my head, but you would imagine that he's someone who excels in track if he's going to do it at Wisconsin as well. But kind of that all-purpose back. Trait that he has to him is a guy that, is going to run the football a little bit. He'll probably be able to catch the ball in the backfield as well. And going back to defensive backs, a guy that I wrote about in that article, Jonas Tecluna, a kid who's going to enroll early, a kid who Wisconsin made an absolute huge priority to get in this 2023 class. I know one of the first places that they hit when Luke Fickell took over, staff members went down to Naples. Then they went down again. And they went down just hours after he completed his official visit. So 3 times down there, I think that shows just how important he is for them in this class. As an early enrollee at a position of need, maybe he sees the field sooner than later. I think the door is open there for him as well.
Yeah, he's a really impressive athlete in his own right, especially when you look at the high jump numbers. Clint and I talked about this. Like, for his size, I mean, he can really get up, and that shows that explosive athleticism that he has. I want to move to talking about a couple guys that they nabbed here really late in the cycle. One of those is Christian Allegro. He's someone who has really grown on me as I've watched his tape more and more. I see a really instinctive football player who's filled out a ton, 6'4", 220, and looks every bit of it, but still moves really well. I'm excited to see what he does at the edge position. Of these guys who have sort of come on, who have signed with Fickell, who is, take away Snowden, who we've talked about, are there any of these other guys that have really popped to you?
Yeah, Tucker Ashcraft, if you kind of have the same thing, it's kind of Tucker Ashcraft for me in the same line. Like you said with Allegro, the more you watch the film, the more you like this guy. I think he's a really nice blend of a blocking option, and that's something that the high school coach, when I talked to him, he said, look, we pass 10 times a game. So, a lot of that film, the bulk of his work is as a blocker, but I think that in the reps that you do see him go out and catch passes, he's a nice option there as well. The tight end's still going to be a part of this offense, I don't think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets, but a guy like Ashcraft who can put his hand on the ground, but also go out and run routes, maybe pop out and play a little bit in the slot as well. I think that he's a really nice addition for this class. And, in every, update and hot board that we had throughout the winter and the spring and the fall, it was all these tight ends coming off the board. And to get a guy like Ashcraft, it took a while, but I think you got to be really happy with a guy like him in this cycle after missing on a handful of guys.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. One guy that's kind of been forgotten in this whole mix is the original UW recruit in the cycle, Tyler Jancy, the middle linebacker out of the Chicago area. And he's being forgotten as far as I'm concerned. No one's talking about him. And, I think he's a kid who's probably going to play special teams as a freshman. I mean, I really, really like him a lot. I thought he probably should have been a 4-star. Like he is so instinctive in the way that he plays football. He reminds me of TJ Edwards. Everyone talking about, Jack Sanborn with him. I see TJ Edwards in him all day. He's the only middle linebacker in this prospect. And I think he's actually a great fit here in the 3-3-5.
Yeah, and to steal a word from Clint or a term from Clint, the old Midwest Mike, and that he kind of pops like that on tape. And the Chicago swing that I did, and Jake Kalkarowski was down there too. It seems like a million years ago, but I got a chance to see him in person. I mean, physically, he looks the part. He looks like a guy if you needed to in the guaranteed rate bowl. I mean, just really physically impressive. And those type of guys, when you don't have to have that full year or 2 in the strength and conditioning program. Well, then you're like, well, let's get this guy on special teams right away and see what he can do. So it would not surprise me if you see him next year kind of pop up on the kick return team or the kickoff team or something in the special teams. I'm curious to see how that inside linebacker room kind of shakes out with the team going to a 3-3-5. Again, that's not official yet, but I think all the signs point to Wisconsin going that way. But yeah, like you talked about, instinctual, really understands the game. He's all around the ball. And like I said, big physical kid that likes to fill the hole and can clean up what's in front of him.
All right. Well, we've gone almost 20 minutes without talking about quarterbacks. And for most programs, that would be blasphemy, but it's Wisconsin, so it's kind of par for the course. Now, I thought it was really interesting that, as soon as Fickell came on, apparently he got to know LeCroux and didn't try to bring Drogosh, the quarterback he had signed, who was supposed to sign to Cincinnati with him. And there seems to be a lot of confidence in LeCroux. And after you watch LeCroux's senior tape, I can totally see why. He, to me, made such a jump from a junior to a senior. He went from what looked like maybe a MAC or an FCS prospect to someone who is, definitely a Power 5 prospect. And I think you see the leadership. I was fortunate. I talked to Roderick Rogers earlier this week, who was in his area, tried to recruit him to get on his own 7-on-7 team unsuccessfully, because I thought this was a really interesting story, though. Rod was saying that, Cole said, the only way I'm joining your 7-on-7 team is if I can bring my entire team with me. And otherwise, I'm not going. And to me, that shows a certain level of leadership that you don't always see in 18-year-olds. What are your thoughts here on LeCroux, and what do you think Fickell sees in LeCroux as a prospect?
Well, I think what you said right away, Matt, is the important thing here. Wisconsin could have came in and said, okay, we're going to bring Drogosh with us from Cincinnati. And that's just kind of a done deal. And I think with the success that you've seen in the guys that they've targeted from Cincinnati and trying to bring them over, I think they could have been successful in doing that. Now, like I said, I think it says a lot that they looked at Cole LeCroux, the kid who was already committed, and said, let's dive deeper in this kid. Let's go out to see him play. The wide receivers coach Fickell was talking about today went out to watch him play in that championship game. Felt good about that. Phil Longo, obviously, I'm sure signed off on this one too. So, a nice blend of arm strength and being able to make plays with his feet. And another kid in this class, the more you watch the tape, the more you could see the fit there. So again, Matt, I think the point you made was good, is that they could have tried to flip Drogosh. They basically said, we feel good about LeCroux, and the way that they're recruiting, I think it speaks to, the talent that LeCroux does have and how they envision him fitting in this program. They must think that he's a pretty high level kid if they stuck with him and they didn't try to flip the 4-star who was already over there in Cincinnati.
All right. Well, I will get you out of here on this. How many more prospects will the Badgers sign on February signing day?
That's a tough one. Fickle talked for about 30 minutes today, and he brought up in January a handful of times. January, kind of indicating that there's some options, and they'll take a look at late options here as well. They didn't sign a defensive lineman. He was asked about that, and obviously Jamel Howard's still out there. I think a big thing there is once they get that position coach in place, that they make a big run at Jamel Howard again, and a kid that is, to my knowledge, unless I missed something, I probably missed a lot today. There's a lot going on. Did not sign today. Wisconsin's there, Michigan's there, so obviously he's a kid that they want to go after. As you kind of reflect back, Fickle did talk about someone who could have fit the Trech Kekahuna role, and obviously they got him. They felt like, I think he said something like, "There's what you'd like to make." I think that means trench there, but there's still some positions out there, defensive line being one of them, where I think they're going to take a long look at some guys, and if something makes sense, they'll pull the trigger there. So if it's 1, 2, or 3, I don't know that it gets to 5, but in that 2 to 4 range, I think it's pretty realistic. And they do also want to use the transfer portal as well. Obviously not something that they want to build this program on, but there's some guys they have identified, and I think they want to fill some holes there. I think off the top of my head, they're still working with about 10 scholarships. So there's going to be activity for that February signing day. It'll be interesting to see how many guys it is once the dust settles.
Yeah, I think based on your latest projections this morning, now that Kekahuna has been added, I think it's 11. I think it's 11 available slots as it stands, including Evers and all of the kids who have signed for 2023. So plenty still to fill out and round out this roster. And, we also saw the Badgers bring in guys over the summer, Kamoiletu, just this past summer. So the roster is not nearly set, but there's a lot of really, really intriguing new prospects coming onto campus for 2023, a bunch of early enrollees too, which is really nice to see as well. What I think, 6, 7, I want to say early enrollees out of
6.
Yeah, 6. So it's going to be, a lot of new faces around the building, very soon, not just on the coaching staff, but on the player side as well. So, John, any final words here on what has been a pretty exciting early signing day?
Yeah, it's been a wild day. Like I said, the trench stuff is surprising as I can remember, and doing this for 15 plus years or so. And I think just the general vibe, Matt, is fans are really excited, and I think there's good reason for that. Recruiting's been a lot of fun, and the last couple of weeks have been really wild, and it's gonna be interesting to see these guys, what they're able to do. But kind of the last thing here, keep in mind, this is just a very abbreviated class. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what Fickle can do with this full staff and that 2024 group. There's going to be a lot of options from inside the state. Obviously, they're going to go into Ohio. So in that first full cycle, we got a little bit of taste of what he can do in 2023. In a full cycle, I think that, having a top 25 recruiting class certainly isn't out of the realm of possibility there.
Definitely. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us here today on Badger Blitz TV. Make sure you are staying tuned to BadgerBlitz.com for all of your Wisconsin football updates, including all of the coverage of National Signing Day from John, from Clint, Raul. Everyone is around, all hands on deck for National Signing Day. So we will be back later this week with myself and Clint talking, breaking down more signing day stuff as well. So it's a lot of fun. Make sure you are subscribing here on the YouTube page. And until next time, we will see you guys in the den.